So awesome. So the number one thing to start off with proposals is we're going to go over the proposal basics. What do proposals do? And it'll be really tough to get in a grasp on how you can use proposals effectively if you're not sure of what proposals can actually do for you. So we're going to cover some of those basics first. So the first thing we'll talk about is what proposals do from a functionality standpoint, and what proposals are designed to do. They're responsible for pitching your services or your scope of work. So that's on the very basic level. That's what proposals are designed to do, is to pitch your process or your services or your products or your scope of work to your clients. That's what they're designed to do. And so the first thing we'll talk about are packages, because packages are going to go onto proposals, and packages and proposals are connected. So the very first thing I want to talk about today, before we actually get into proposals, is setting up your packages so that you can create your packages first before jumping into a proposal, and you're setting up your packages effectively. So let's jump into the packages here, and we're going to go through a couple of these things here. We're going to give you some examples of packages so that you can understand how you should frame these. And your packages, if you're newer to Dubsado, are going to be anything that you have product-wise or service-wise that has a price point attached to it. So as you can see here, I have, some different web design level packages or some engagement photo shoot level packages. If you have add-ons, those are created as packages in the system. Anything that has a price point that you want to attach, that's going to be what a package is in the system. So it can be a variety of things. And I wanted to give you some examples so you can understand how to structure your packages in the right way. And I am a food lover. And so what I'm going to explain when it comes to how you can think about using your packages is I'm going to break it down here with some of these that I have down here at the bottom. So I'm going to give you an example of how you can think about packages. And I'm going to use the example of a home style dinner. If you were going to a restaurant and you were going to go get a home style dinner, this is how you would break down your packages. So let's just say that I offer a home style dinner to my client. And so if I open this up, how you can break down your packages is in a couple different ways. The first way is you can title your package whatever you would like it to be called, but how packages are broken down is with different line items that go inside of that package. So in this case, I only have one line item, and the description of that line item is what that client is getting. And so you can set it up this way where you basically say, hey, this is what the package is, and this is how it's broken down is in the description if you don't want to itemize all the things that they're getting inside that package. So as you can see, home style dinner, this is what you get with it, and this is the overall price point. So that's one way that you can break it down, is you just have one line item in that package, and everything that they get within that line item is within the description there. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is where you're actually going to itemize out everything that they're getting and broken down by price point. So this is the same thing, the same type of package, but as you can see here, it's broken down by line item. If you're doing it this way, every single line item you have will have a price point attached to it, as you can see. So you have to decide on if you're going to offer a package, is it more where you just have one line item and everything is in the description, or do you want to have it where it's one package, but everything is itemized out with a price point next to it? If you do it this way, there is not a way for a client to choose each individual line item if you're adding this to a proposal. And I'm going to show you how you do that next. But this is a way that if they did choose, I want this package, every line item that's underneath here, they would get in that package. So that's another way that you can do a package. If you want these itemized out where you want them to be able to choose these almost like sides, if you will, like add-ons, then what you would do actually is you would create all of these as individual packages. So I have, let's say, a chicken package or a corn package. So you would break them down as different packages if you want them where they're all individual packages or to be able to be selected individually. So the first thing before you get into proposals, if you're planning on taking packages and putting them on the proposal, think about which one of these examples fits best. Do you want them where they're all individual packages and they can choose them individually? Do you want it where it's more of an itemized list of everything they're getting with price points attached to every single one? Or do you want it set up where it's more of just one line item, as you can see here, but really the description is what goes in there? So those are kind of the different examples of how you can set up your packages in Dubsado. And the best thing you can do is just sit down, look at what services or products you offer, and figure out which one best fits your business. So that's a quick crash course on packages. And the reason that I want to start with packages is because really what your packages are, as you can kind of see here, is they're really like the food items on a menu. And your menu is going to be your proposal that you give to the client to say, hey, this is what I have to offer. What is it that you would like from this? So that's just a quick crash course on packages, because packages go with proposals in Dubsado. Those two things go hand in hand, and you usually want to set up your packages first before jumping into proposals. The next thing with proposal basics, the submission of a proposal is what creates an invoice in Dubsado. So how the proposals are designed is really to be like an order form where you can send out your proposal to a client saying, hey, this is what I have to offer. When the client makes their selections on that proposal and they submit it, that automatically generates an invoice in their project based off of what they chose on that proposal. So you can kind of think about a proposal as sort of like a brochure that's a selectable brochure where they can go in and pick the things that they're interested in. That's one way of doing proposals, and we'll get into some other options later, but primarily that's going to be what the proposal is designed to do. They go through, they make their selections, and then an invoice gets generated in their project based off of their selections. So that's another thing, a very basic thing with proposals. And then the other thing too, as well, is you can connect a contract and an invoice to the proposal. And so let me jump over to proposals now so we can take a look at one here so you can get an understanding of what you can do with them. So like I said previously, the packages are going to go with the proposal. And so when you're building forms in Dubsado, these are the different elements that you can use to build your forms. And with the proposals, as you can see here, there's a package element, and that package element is exclusive to proposals. You can't put packages on any other forms. So if you do have packages that you want your client to select, then you'll have to use a proposal in that case. So that's why I like to say packages go with proposals. So with this package, what you can do is you can click and drag, and you can add packages onto your form, and you can customize this and build it how you would like it. So how I have this set up here, as you can kind of see, is I have it where it says, choose one main package. They're kind of choosing their different options that they want as their main package. If there's any add-ons that they want, they can select from those. You don't have to go with the 3-tier process. You can customize these however you want them to be. If you offer, 10 different packages with, 15 add-ons, you can go in and add in all those different packages. So you're going to customize this proposal to fit the different services that you want to offer. For those of you who do more of a quote-based business, I'll be getting to you guys in just a little bit, but this is kind of the main reason that you would use a proposal is for package selection. But with the contract and invoice, what you can do is in the settings menu up here at the top, if we click on that, this is going to give you the ability to add in a contract and also show the invoice that gets created from the proposal. So once a proposal gets submitted, the invoice is in their project only on the back end. So the client doesn't have access to that invoice quite yet. It's only in their project where you can see it. In the settings menu, this is where you can say, I would like the client to be able to see the invoice so that they can make a payment. So the proposal, contract, and invoice can all be tied together in the settings menu. So that means you can pitch your pricing, have the client sign, and have the client pay all up front. And so what I want to do here is, before we move on, I want to show you what that looks like so you can see what it looks like live. So let me go into one of my projects here. I have just a test project that I'm going to use. And what I'll do is I'll go to the forms area and I'm going to add in the package proposal here. So let's see, package proposal, and then we'll click add. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open this up in a private window so that you guys can see this. You should be able to see this, hopefully. Let me know it looks like it's not showing up there. So let me do this here really quickly. Let me just open this up normally, and that should show there. Okay, perfect. So this is going to be the client view. So it's not exactly how a client, or this is going to be the business owner view. So it's not exactly how the client would see it, but just so you can get an idea of what you're going to do. When you combine these three things, you'll have proposal, contract, and invoice. So this ties in everything together in a really great sequence that you can send out to your clients. So if you have this here, you can say, okay, I really want to do the bronze package. They can make their selections on here. Down at the bottom, you can see where it's going to total up the different things that they're selecting there. In the client view, there will be a submit button right next to this so the client can click on that, and then it will take them automatically to the contract. So once they click submit on this proposal, it's then going to create an invoice just on the back end. And then when they get to the contract portion, they're able to go in, they can read through all of your terms and conditions. And then at the very bottom, they can go ahead and sign on that contract, and then they can click submit. And then it will take them to the invoice where it's going to show the invoice that gets created. So this sequence works really well if you want to just pitch your pricing to a client, let them sign, and then let them pay a deposit or pay in full, however you would like that to happen. So one thing I have in here is even if you only need a client to do a contract and an invoice, and that's all you really need them to do, think about adding a proposal to your process, even if it's just for aesthetics, because the sequencing of everything is much simpler for the client. So there's two different types of ways that you can do proposals. There's more package-based, which is what I just showed you there. It's where the client is really going to build that invoice based off of the different things that you offer. And then there's also quote-based. And so understanding your pitching process, or understanding how you deliver your services to a client and let them choose what they're interested in, or basically show them what you're going to do for them, you can use the proposal for both. And so even if you're in a business where you say, well, I just really have them do an invoice and sign a contract, I don't really have like a quote or anything like that, really think about adding that into your business process, because as you can see here, it makes it really easy for the client to be able to go through those three things. And if you are just doing a contract and invoice, you're not able to do these tabs across the top. The proposal is really what ties everything in together to give you that great sequence. And so if you're doing a quote-based, we'll get into that here in just a second, but I want to talk about the difference between a package-based proposal and a quote-based proposal so you can understand the difference between the two. Package-based proposals, and let me just jump back to my proposal here. So package-based proposals are going to revolve around set packages with a fixed price point. Now, there are ways that you can add a proposal into a project and then edit that proposal before it goes out to a client. There's ways to do that, and I'll show you that here in just a little bit. But it's really going to be where you want the client to build their own invoice. That's really the mentality that you can have going into a package-based proposal. I want to send out my services or my products. I want my client to go ahead and pick what they want, and that's going to generate the invoice. So they're basically building their own invoice. This will most likely be the case if there has been no discussion ahead of time about what the client is interested in beforehand. Now, there are cases where you can set it up if you've had a discussion, but typically it's going to be where a client inquires about your services, you send them out a proposal, and you let them pick what they're interested in. That will be probably 75, 80% of the case there is going to be where you send out a proposal with there not really being any discussion on what the client is interested in. So that's a package-based proposal. A quote-based proposal will revolve around creating a custom scope of work for each client. So every time that you're working with a client, it's going to be different every single time. And we're going to get into that here in a second on how you can do quote-based proposals. And this is going to revolve more around the business owner will basically build the invoice for the client. They're going to be setting the scope of work for the client to see when they get the proposal. So that's kind of the main difference between the two, is really with a quote-based proposal, the business owner is kind of setting that scope of work and what they're planning on doing for the client and then sending it to the client. So this will most likely be if there's been a consultation about what the client is interested in beforehand. So this is going to be where you're on the phone with somebody or they're filling out a questionnaire so that you can get an idea of what they're interested in. And then you're going to build a scope of work to then send to the client. So let's talk about that here. And we do have some examples here, and we're kind of following along with this already. We've already talked about the package-based proposal. And so let's get into the quote-like proposal. And this is kind of the first option. And this will be mainly if you're wanting to have an invoice get generated still after they submit it. So let me show you how to do that here. If we go into the proposal, I'll pull up my first option. And this is going to be where you're going to have an empty package element on the proposal, and there's not going to be anything tied to this proposal. It's going to be just a basic empty element. And what you're going to do is you're going to add this to a project. And then once it's in the project, you're going to make your customizations within that project. So let me show you what that looks like. So really what I did was I just took a package element, I drug it onto this proposal, and I left it empty. So I have my custom quote-based proposal. And now if I go into a project, I can then go to that. We'll go to that same test project here, and we'll pop in here, and we'll jump in here. And what you can do now with this is we'll go down to the quote-like proposal, and we'll open this up. Now, if you're brand new to Dubsado, this is great knowledge to have. When you click add on a form, any form, a contract, questionnaire, proposal, when you click add, what that does is it takes that master template that we have in the templates area and it creates a copy and it adds it to this project. So now if I click edit on this proposal, I am now only making customizations just to this proposal in this project. I'm not messing with my master template anymore. It's only within this project. So if I go in here and I have my empty package element, what I can do now is I can click in here and I can either create a brand new package that's never been used before, that's never been created. I can select from all of my packages which one I want to start with as just a base. So let's say here, I want to add in my home style dinner. And so we'll add that in there. And once I've added that in there, what I can do now is I can click edit and I can make changes. Oops, my fault. Let me go back in here and we click edit. There we go. So I can go in here and I can click edit on this package and I can make customizations to this without affecting any of my master templates. So I've basically added in something that I can create just from scratch, or if it's a package that I just want to edit, change the price point on, all of that good stuff, I can make changes to this and then I can click apply and then I can close out, and this will only be for this particular client. This will only be a quote for them. Or I can go in and let's say that I want to select maybe a different package. I can put in maybe a few different, separate options for them. So if I wanted to add a couple different packages for them to select from to build their own invoice that's completely custom, you can do that as well. Another thing that you can do is if you want to give them a proposal where you don't want them to click that select button because you've already talked to them beforehand, what you can do is you can pre-select this package so it's already selected when they receive it. And then what you can do is you can actually get rid of this select button entirely. So there's no way that they can unclick that select button, because obviously if you discussed beforehand, this is what we're planning on doing for you, you don't want them to say, yes or no, or uncheck that select button, because that's what you've discussed. So by pre-selecting it and removing that select button, now it becomes a quote where when they receive this, it's already pre-selected. There's no way they can unselect it. And what they'll do to basically create that invoice is they will click the submit button that will be at the bottom, and it'll have the total at the bottom based off of what you talked about. So that's a way that you can create a custom proposal for a client. And that will be completely custom for every person. Like I said, when you add this to a project, it creates a copy of your master template, which means you only really need one template. And then when you add it to a project, you'll really customize it once you get in there. So with your master templates, just kind of create a shell of what you normally do. And then when you go into a project, that's where you can really make your customizations. So this option here, what this does for you is the invoice will get created after the submission, because again, this is a package technically, but it's completely custom for each client. This is the recommended way that we usually recommend doing this. The reason why is because with this option, there's not going to be an invoice that gets created beforehand, because you don't really know if you're going to be working with them. And I'll explain why with this third option, which is the quote like proposal option 2. So that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is, if we go back to the forms here, is where you're going to create an invoice beforehand before you send them the proposal. And what you're going to do is you're going to add in a text box into your proposal. And if we click into this, what you can do is you can add invoice smart fields to display invoice information before basically create the invoice before you send out this proposal. And this proposal is going to grab that invoice information and display it on the proposal for the client to say, yes, this looks great. I think this will work for me. So this is where you're going to do the invoice first and then send out the proposal. The other option is where you're going to just do a custom package, and then upon submission, that creates the invoice. So if we go to the outline here, basically there's two ways to do a quote like proposal. You can either do it where the invoice will get created after the submission, so you don't have a lot of open invoices, or you can do it where you create the invoice first and then have that go onto the proposal. So if you're doing this option here, what you'll actually do is, if you go into a project, and we'll go back to that same project here, what you'll actually do is you'll create the invoice first. So you'll come into this invoice section here, and let's add in a few packages. So let's do, we'll just do a couple things here. We'll add in a package. We'll add in a few add-ons. We'll put these in there. And once you've created your invoice first, what you would do is you would go to the form section and you would grab that quote like proposal. And what it's going to do is it's going to read what you've already done. Whoops, that was a wrong one here. Let me grab that. Oh, that's not showing up there. 1 second here. Let me remove some of this. And it should populate. Pull that up here. Not sure why that's not pulling in. My apologies. But what it should do for you is it should pull in the information from that invoice. I might have done something wrong here. My apologies. There we go. So, and it will pull in what's already on that invoice. So you create your invoice ahead of time. And then when you go to send out this quote, it's going to look at the invoice that you've created, and it's just going to plug it in to this particular invoice. So if you want to do it where it's this style, where they're not really creating an invoice from that proposal, it's kind of the opposite. You're doing the invoice first and then having it display on the proposal. What you'll actually do is on that form, if we go back to this form here, in this text box, what you're going to use is you're going to use invoice smart fields to display information from that invoice that you've created. And the ones that I use to get that same look and feel is the invoice item names and amounts. And then also you can use the invoice total, and that will put the total of the invoice on there. So there's basically two ways that you can do it. You can do it where it's a custom package in a way, and then that creates an invoice, or you do it where it's the invoice first and then have that show on the proposal. With these options, what we recommend is the first way of doing it. The reason why is because if you create the invoice beforehand and then put it on a proposal, what we've noticed is that on the dashboard, it's going to have all of these invoices that haven't been paid, and it will stack up in your open invoice area. So if you don't want an invoice to get created until they accept the quote, do it the first way where you do it the custom package route. If you already know they're going to be working with you and you want to do that second way, you can do it like that. And then that will, it'll still do the invoice first where you have the open invoices, but then once they pay, then it will take care of it. So you can kind of decide which way you want to go with that. And then the last thing is public proposals. And with a public proposal, that's going to be where you can take a proposal and you can embed it on your website so a client can make selections from your website and then have that generate an invoice and create a project in Dubsado. So this is where it's really more of kind of like e-commerce, where you have your services or your products on your website and a client can pick packages from your website. The same rules apply as far as bringing your packages in. The exact same rules apply, except what you'll need to do here is you'll actually have to add in the ability for them to put in their first name, last name, and email on the form. And you can do that by adding short answer elements to the proposal. So they'll still make their selections, but we have to be able to collect their contact information so Dubsado knows how to create a project and who to put the client with when that project gets created. So at the very minimum, what you'll need is three things: a spot for first name, last name, and email. All three have to be required. As you can see here, I have them required, and they have to map to the correct area. So you have to have one for first name, one for last name, and one for email. So on this last name one, I have one there. And for the email one, I have one for email, and they all have to be required. So that's very important. You have to have that on there in order to do a public proposal where it's going to be embedded on your website. Once you have that done, if we scroll up to the top, this share button on the proposal will now be activated. And the other thing you'll need to do as well to make sure of is in the settings menu on your proposal, if we scroll down, right here where it says create a new project when the proposal is completed, you'll want to say yes on that. So that means that once they fill out that proposal on your website, it would then create a new project in Dubsado where the proposal and the invoice will be stored. So you have to say yes on there so that Dubsado knows, okay, this is a public proposal. We're actually going to create a project from this. Once you've done that, if you click share, you can then grab this iframe code, plug that into your web builder, and then this proposal will be embedded on your website so people can go there and book and create their invoice directly from your website. And then that will create them in Dubsado with that proposal and invoice in the system, and contract if you want to add that in there. So that's going to be basically the 4 different types of proposals that we have. There's a lot of different combinations that you can do. So those are kind of the 4 foundational ways, but you can always do really custom ways of doing it and use your creativity to kind of combine a lot of those different areas that we talked about today. But primarily, those are going to be the 4 ways that you can use proposals in Dubsado. And again, really quickly before I open it up for questions, I'll highlight this again. Even if you only need the client to sign a contract and pay an invoice, really think about adding that proposal into the mix, because that sequencing makes it so much easier for the client. Even if on your proposal, all you have is just a body of scope of work, and that's all that it shows on there. You can add some pictures in there, put your logo on there, even if it's just very basic, just think about adding that in there, because then you can tie in that contract and invoice to really give that smooth sequence for the client. So think about adding that in there. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to, obviously, but the proposal really kind of gives a good aesthetic look to your business, so the client can see the scope of work very clear. They can sign the contract and then pay the invoice at the end.